Over to you guys.
Right, so, hello folks. I am Sam, this is Ben, and this is
Hello.
Stu. And what we thought we'd talk about today is the stuff that they may not actually teach you in college, namely what happens to your website after it's built and how you build it and how you test it, those kind of things, which we... Okay, right, so all the stuff that maybe they don't teach you at the part because they're too busy teaching you how to actually build the thing. We are going to show you, we picked a random site that finished up last week, which is called, it's not that, it's not a big site, it's not a, come on.
Where's the mouse?
Phil, okay, right, so it's just, it's one of the sort of smaller, typical kind of Cheltenham-based sites that we do. We do big stuff, we do small stuff. This is one of the smaller ones, and Stu built it and turned it around really quickly. And the reason we're showing this one is because it launched last week. Okay, so it's fresh in the mind, and also some of the kind of optimization stuff is yet there. Okay, so this site is a luxury chauffeur service, if you like, and there's basically two audiences for any website. Okay. The first one is humans, and the second one are services. And the services, by services I mean if you treat Google or search engines as a user, Google has to be able to see this site in the best way possible in order for it to come up with search results. Okay, so we're going to talk about that sort of things in a bit. Firstly, okay, I am guessing that you guys are not in the need of this website at the moment, but you can kind of imagine who the user is, who the users are, the user types, what kind of users they are, if they're male, female, if they've got money, if they've not got money, where they are in the world, right? I'm guessing you guys don't want to shout out at me who you think the user type might be, right? No, it's like that, okay. So, alright, so what you've got to do when you're designing a website or when you're building a website, you've got to imagine who the audience is going to be. Most of the time it is not you. So you've got to imagine there's some mythical user who is, I don't know, 40 years old, lives in the Cotswolds, needs a wedding or something, and basically is in need of this service. Okay, and you've got to imagine you're that person, and you've got to imagine that you are viewing this website, and you've got to imagine what you are thinking, or what they are thinking. Okay, so for example, if there's a broken image or a broken link on that page, you would think, hang on, if they can't make their websites work, then the car's going to break down on me, right? That's not cool. So that's your job as a web builder to fix these things and to make the experience better. If you're on a mobile, because hey, I'm looking at wedding cars on my mobile, you expect it to look good on the mobile as well as on the desktop. Again, that's your job to make it look right on all the devices that you can. Okay? So, and if you wouldn't expect it, can I have a look at the Zen one, please? So you wouldn't expect it to look like this, for example, right? So it's about the this comes back to design and making the right design. If the wedding cars look like that, you would be, I'm not in the right place. This is not for me, this is not talking to me, this is not the right place. And you bugger off and go somewhere else, right? Okay, so let's go back. Now, the point at which these two users meet is how do you get to this site in the first place? And if you go to the Google listings, okay, so if you were this mythical 40-year-old woman looking for chauffeur services, you would type something into Google, and hopefully the site, if we've built it correctly, will come up on this list. So what you see here is a bunch of ads that are paid for. Okay, not a lot we can do about that apart from paying or they can pay for some more ads, which they haven't got the budget for. There's a kind of map thing as well. And this site comes up here and here. And the reason it's not coming up top just yet is a few things really. One, it's quite new, it's a week old, so Google hasn't done its crawling yet. We imagine it will probably come up to about number 2. And the second reason is because there's competitors in the way. Right? So these people have been up for longer, maybe they're doing better at doing search engine stuff, what have you. Okay. So again, for this mythical user to get to this site, it needs to work properly enough for it to come up on that. And for this person to think, ooh, services since 2011, okay, I'll click on that one. So this is really, really important. This is the kind of barrier for that user getting to the site. Okay? And what we're going to talk about a lot about today is how we actually get up on there and what are the kind of, there's hundreds of different ways of trying to get up on that list and make it right for Google. Okay. So you've got your site design, you've got it approved by your client, you've built your site, and you're almost ready to go live. And now we come to the kind of hosting bit, which is I'm going to hand over to Ben. As you might have gathered, I'm kind of design kind of end of practically. Ben is very much the techie kind of side of things, and Stu, I should have said this at the start, shouldn't I? Stu is actually one of you, so he's in second year of this course? Yeah.
Third.
He's on a work placement with us for the project, basically. Okay. And Seb over there was Stu last year. Okay. Go. Ben.
Right.
Mike. Okay. So,
in order for a site to be on the internet, it needs to be hosted somewhere. So we have a server that's in a secure data center somewhere on the M4 corridor, and that's connected to the core internet services in the UK and London via a very, very fast internet pipe. Now you can serve things to the internet from anywhere, but if you want your website to be pretty much permanently available and fast and safe and secure, then it needs to be in a data center, really. If you flip through any IT magazines, there's always hundreds of adverts for hosting. I hope that you cover hosting on your course at some point.
Yeah, a little bit of it.
Yeah. So we have a server sitting somewhere. We connect to it through SSH, which is secure shell. That allows us to run commands on it remotely, so there's no UI as such. And we upload the site to there and install it and get it all running. In order to access it through the web, we need to point a domain name at it. So domain names are purchased from a registrar, like 123reg or fasthost or something like that. You're familiar with these concepts? So yeah, purchase a domain, you specify your name servers. Your name servers have a DNS record which say for these different sorts of traffic, you need to go here, there, or everywhere. So we would say for the domain name Azure luxury cars or whatever it is, point all of the web traffic at our server, and that record is proliferated throughout the internet around the world. So anybody typing in the domain name will get routed through to our server. Yeah, you're familiar with that. Cool. How DNS works is unnecessarily complicated and well due an overhaul. So maybe in your lifetime you'll see DNS2, which will be less of a pain in the ass. But for the moment, this is how it works. So we've routed traffic to our site. We've uploaded our site to the server, so we can take a look at it for the first time. And with any luck, it will look like this. Invariably it doesn't. You load it and there's something that's broken. So a difference in the configuration of the web server or PHP or database records that you just need to tweak and change. But you will get it to a point where your site is live and you can give yourselves a pat on the back and pop down the pub and say, right, job done. If you did that, you'd sort of be missing the vital final step, which is really what we want to cover today, which is putting the final bits of polish on it to make it as good as it can possibly be for your client and for Google. So once the site's up there, there's a few steps that we run through. I think at this point, I'm going to hand over to Stu. Yeah?
Yeah, sure.
So, this.
I'll just go this one. Yeah. So when we get it live, you've got all your big code and all your pages and all that stuff. The way we do things is we have a framework called Yi, which is interwoven with our own CMS, so like WordPress, but much better. And it generates a lot of junk. So there's loads of junk, there's loads of white spaces, loads of blank lines, and to call that out, we minify files. I don't know if you've ever downloaded like jQuery or something, and it's just you get it up like it's just a big massive numbers and brackets and stuff. There it is. That's not jQuery, that's CSS, that's minified CSS. And that is much harder for us to read, but it's much easier for browsers to read because it loads so much quicker. So to do this, we could go through and remove every single white space in line, but we actually have a script through Grunt, which does it all for us, deploys our thing. So, yeah.
So, Grunt is a processing library, essentially. It runs under Node.js. So you will write a script for your specific site that says, I need these JavaScript files, I need these CSS files, and I want to basically smush them all up together to produce a single JavaScript file and a single CSS file. And then depending on whether we put live or dev, it will then do the minification or not. You can Google Grunt, there's a load of boilerplate stuff out there. I do suggest you take a look at it because it's pretty cool. So when we're ready, we run Joy Live, which goes through all of our separate CSS files. In fact, it goes through all of our less files and processes the less into CSS and then combines all of those into a minified CSS file, and it does the same with the JavaScript. That then gives us two files to upload that are all squished. And we'll get on to why that's important later.
So we also have another script which sort of compresses it, puts it into a nice little package, and then that can go on the server via FTP or however you want to get it there. That then we need to test because it's on the server, and going back to what Ben said, it never works first time. At least my work never gets. So when you make a request through a browser, you get a response code, and the response code tells you if the website, the web page works. And most of them are 500s, which is usually my fault because it's a database thing or it's like something that you've an inconsistency with the server. So your local environment, you'll have it set up one way, and then the server it'll be a different configuration. So you'll have to make some changes or something like that. You've got broken links, missing pages. You just have to go back in and sort all those out. the way we get to those response codes and find out what they are is we use a tool called Screaming Frog. And because I made this website very well, they're all 200, which is okay. And this tells us, it just goes through every page, every asset, and tells us if it can retrieve it.
So, Screaming Frog, it's a free tool. You download it, it's installed on your computer. The free one does up to 500 URLs, which is plenty for most websites. And it will spider your website. It'll look through every link and every file, and it will give you an awful lot of information back. What we're interested in is have we got any links or pages that are throwing 400 errors, so don't exist.
That's not ours, it's okay.
No. Or 500, which are server errors. 300 are redirections, 200 are good. So the first thing we would check is have we got any bad pages. Next thing we would check is the H1 tags. So that's the HTML heading 1 tag, which Google uses as one of its primary parameters for assessing what a given page is about. So from a design point of view, you can take it or leave it. The page should have a title. From a search point of view, it's fundamental that every page has an H1, firstly, and secondly, that all of your pages' H1s are unique.
And thirdly, there's only one on every page.
Yeah. So we can filter up here to find any pages that have it missing and any pages that have duplicates. Okay. You can do the same for H2. H2 is less critical than H1, and if you're sort of doing belt braces, you want to get everything buttoned up, then you can use this to work through your H2 tags as well. So we've got a few that are duplicates, and you read through the list and say, well, is that important or not? A page can have multiple H2s, so it's less critical. And then the other things we'll check are I was going to say page titles. So from a Google point of view, your page title, your H1, your meta description, and there's one more, Sam.
What are you talking about?
that Google.
Oh, the rank song. Yeah, H1, meta description, slug, URL.
Yeah, and the URL. So we just check that everything is as it should be, that there's none missing, and none duplicated.
Again, all this is stuff that the client doesn't really care about, the owner of the website. It's basically our job to give Google what it needs to understand what a page is for, when it should serve up that page to a particular user. So if a user's looking for chickens in Cheltenham, we basically make a page that's just about chickens in Cheltenham. Stupid example, right? So it's basically giving Google enough clues to work out what that page is all about. This is what
so this offers you a different view of your website than you just clicking through the pages. And it's a very useful tool for tidying up things that you might have missed. Now, do you want to talk about three ones?
Yeah. So usually when you upgrade an existing website, they've already got their own pages, and you reinvent those pages. But a lot of the times they're not the same. You don't take the same path to that page, so it'll be a different URL. Going back to response codes, 301 is like a redirection. So it says the page still exists, but it's over here now. And to do that, we go into the database and we have it all set up through our CMS and our framework, so that it's easier. And we just tell our application to every time they receive a URL for one of the old pages, find out where the new one is and just take it straight to them.
So the reason that's important is that your existing site will have a search ranking, and it will be based on the URLs that are in that site. If you launch a new site, those URLs are going to be different. And if you use the 301 redirect on the old pages, it will transfer all of the search juice, search rating that page has from the old one to the new one. So the new site will basically pick up where the old one left off, rather than having to start from scratch. And it amazes me the number of web agencies that launch new sites that don't do this, and it's an absolute fundamental if your goal is that your client site's going to be found. So that's 301 redirects. What will we talk about next?
You can talk about semantic web.
So going back to what we were saying about Google reading your page, Google's one of our audiences, or rather search engines and bots as a whole. We have to structure and write the page, there we go, in a certain way so that bots can understand it. Because when they receive a page, they don't receive all the images like the way we do. They see this, and they have to decide from this whether the page is relevant to the search result or whether the page is worth indexing high enough. So semantics basically is giving your telling Google what each element is and why it's important. So I mean, using HTML5 tags like section and name somewhere, it is in there. Header, footer, instead of just using divs with an ID or a class. Article, aside, things like that helps Google structure the page better, sort of get an idea as to how humans can see it, rather than just seeing a bunch of divs with text in. That's becoming increasingly important because a lot of people tend to forget that these HTML5 tags exist, and you know, they're racking their brains thinking, oh, I've got H1s every page, I've got my description is perfect to the letter, but it's not ranking high enough. Because from Google's perspective, the structure of the website just doesn't make sense.
So Google will read the site from the top to the bottom, and it will apply more priority to things higher up. That's why we start with the title and the meta descriptions. The other key one here is our canonical. So you might get to a site or a page through various different routes. You might have multiple domains, or you might have a page that you want in 2 or 3 places in your nav, and that gives it different URLs. But you only want it indexed once. So having a canonical URL will tell Google, this is what I am. However you got here, this is how you should index me.
Can I just go on that one a bit more? So for example, if you
Web developers not
So imagine if you clicked on a banner ad from Google or something, and it came to a page, and it would say apple.com / whatever, and then it would have a query string with loads of gobbledygook afterwards. Okay, that URL with the gobbledygook after it is, to a human, it's exactly the same as if you didn't have all that gobbledygook after it, but to Google it's 2 different pages, 2 different URLs, and it sees 2 different URLs, and it sees the same content on both URLs. So one with a query string and one without. And if you don't have the canonical set up correctly, it basically doesn't waste any time working out which one is the right one. It basically kills both. It says, duplicate content, going to kill you both. So the canonical, which is built into most CMSs, that kind of stuff is really, really important. And duplicate content is a really bad idea. Okay. So I think we're going to talk about speed now.
Yes.
Cool.
I'll do that one. So we've launched our site, it's all there, traffic's being routed to it, we've redirected all of the old pages to the new pages, we've checked that structurally it's all there, that the HTML is correct and valid, that it's got all the right tags in the right places, and we're all good. So the next thing to think about is how does it perform? Google, we'll talk about Google because it's the majority search engine. There are others out there, I'm sure you use them, but Google is the one that everybody wants to be found in. So that's kind of the one we focus on, but it's not obviously the only one. So we, here we go. Right. Google are going to launch a new search algorithm in June or July. And it's going to prioritise the mobile first. So they will index and prioritise mobile content above desktop content. We found that for a lot of sites, mobile usage is above 50% now, obviously depending on who the site's for, but certainly most consumer-focused sites, mobile is the predominant platform. So Google's shifting their algorithm to prioritise that, probably quite rightly. Because mobile usage tends to be over networks, certainly much more than sort of mobile networks rather than sort of in-home Wi-Fi or hard-line connections. They are also wanting to prioritise sites that load quickly. So these two things, mobile first and speed, are going to become major factors in how well your site is going to perform in search. So with that in mind, we use a tool called Pingdom. There are others, we like this one. What it does, you put in your, I regret doing this probably, but there we go. Yeah, this is kind of way. You put in your URL and it pings it from a server, in this case in Sweden, and it'll come back with some responses. I will show you this one, for example. Gives you useful information like how long it took to load, that's the critical thing, its relation to other sites, how many HTTP requests it makes to the page, and this overall page weight. So there's a correlation between the number of requests, the size of the things it has to download, and the time it takes to load. So we want to be minimizing how many files are on that page, the size of them, and therefore how quickly it loads. Depending on the design, we can't sometimes do a lot about the images that are used on a page. So if a client wants a site with lots of images, then you just got to live with that. But we can control how many JavaScript and CSS files are used. We can control third-party widgets that get added in, because we can load them afterwards with Ajax. And we can control the size of those CSS and JavaScript files, which is why there is value in doing what we talked about earlier with the minifying and the concatenating of files. So instead of, for example, WordPress, every plugin having its own JavaScript and CSS, and then you needing to make like 30 requests, by combining them, you only make one request, and by minifying it, it becomes a small file. So this is why we did that earlier step. Yeah. So it tells you what your content is, percentage-wise, where it gets it from, and this thing, you may have seen it in your browser consoles, but it lists out all the things it downloads and how long it takes for each one. And this one will tell you where any bottlenecks in your hosting might be. If you're a data geek, this is really interesting to look at. Again, you might not care less about each one of these.
Because I like this.
You like this.
I do like this. I spend a lot of time working out speed. So what's important here is the idea that, let's imagine you've got a site and you've got lots of little tiny images. Okay? Each of the images is really, really small. And a bit like here actually, you've got quite a few fairly small images. Basically the green bit there is how long it takes to download from the server, which is what we imagine takes time. But the yellow bit is sitting there waiting for it to get stuff from the server. So it would be better for all of those images to be compressed into one big image that takes a fair while to download, but it's only asking one thing from the server. So every time you ask something of the server, there's a delay. And that delay is actually causing, so if you look at it, there's hardly any green on this at all. It's all yellow, and the yellow, especially that big one down here, the yellow is waiting for the server to do its thing. And the busier the site gets, the more yellow you get. Okay? So that's kind of, out of the load time there, 2.13 seconds. I would imagine that only half a second is actually getting stuff from the server. The rest of it is waiting. Now 2.1 seconds is ridiculous, really. That's quite fast, I would say. But Google wants it faster, because it's like that. Has our site come up yet?
That wasn't so.
Was it?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, it's from New York though. Also matters where you're doing it from. So the server is in Maidenhead by London. If you're in New York, then that's quite a few hops away from London. If you're doing it from Sweden, it's closer, etc., etc. So if you did it from Australia, which is another one of the options, it would be a lot slower. So where the server is also matters.
Yes. We'd probably spend all day talking about this stuff. But we're not going to. So this is one test. The other one, or another one, is Google's Page Speed Insights, which we hate.
We do hate.
We hate
Lies.
with a passion. So Google says speed's important. We'll give you this tool to analyse it. And then, firstly, it doesn't work, and secondly, it gives you advice on what you can do to speed it up. And the things that it advises on are Google's own services, like Google Fonts API and Google Analytics. So it's all very well using these tools, but also to know which things that you can effectively change and which things are just blatantly wrong and you should ignore. But given that search is important and this is Google's tool, we do try to take a heed of the advice it gives us. So
This one is important because this is coming in June or July when mobile first comes in and the new algorithm. This is basically what they will define your site speed as. So even though this one is completely flawed and frankly nonsense, and the things that are wrong with our site are Google's own bits of code that we have to use because it says we have to. This is what we have to basically obey, which is really upsetting. And I've had many a rant on the phone to Google. It's just been fun.
yeah, we've enjoyed listening to those.
Yeah, it's been futile.
So the only other things to mention about speed is there are some things you can do to your server setup in your htaccess files. which I will just show you very, very quickly because they are quite geeky, to assist in the speed and caching of the site. So you can get Apache to do compression and decompression of things as it's sending them and receiving them. And you can set file types and things on there. You can download all of this stuff off the internet. There's boilerplate examples that you just grab the bits you need from. You can use it to set the caching and expiration on different file types. Some things never change, so you need a long cache. Other things you might want to change regularly, so they need short cache times. But if a page is cached by the browser, it doesn't need to come back to your server to reload it, so effectively that page loads quicker. And then this bottom section is about making sure that whatever route somebody's got to your site, if you've got multiple domain names, if you're using HTTPS or HTTP, if you want www dot or not, it's saying I'm going to choose HTTPS www dot my domain name, and a whole site's going to be served through that. So whatever other route you come in on, redirect to my canonical one. That way, Google's not going to see multiple versions of your site and either dilute your ranking or downgrade it because he's seeing duplicate content. So again, this is something that just lives in your htaccess file. It's part of your project, and when you do a new project, you just copy it over and it sits there and does its thing. Right, that's enough for speed. Let's talk now about competitor analysis.
Alright.
Yeah, you can do this.
Okay. So, can we have the search results one, please?
Yep.
So this is basically to say that you launch your site and you hopefully have done everything you possibly can do. These guys have competitors, and those competitors may or may not be on this list. Okay? So once you launch your site, you can you're trying always to get up this list, and you're trying to basically do better than these people, for example. Okay? And you're all fighting for the same customers. You're all trying to get at the top of Google. You're trying to do the content of the site to try and basically get yourself up the list on Google as well. So if you're writing an article, for example, about what people are searching for, you're trying to get faster than these guys in order to get up the list. And it's a turf war. It's never-ending turf war either, because when you change something, it affects Google or your traffic. But these guys are changing stuff all the time. And it's there's two ways to deal with this. You either find yourself getting really, really nerdy about all this kind of stuff and really into it, or you just give up. there's only two options really. So, for example, there's another client that we deal with, and they deal with finance for fancy cars, right? One of the search terms they rank on is Ferrari finance. Okay. And basically, if you type Ferrari finance and their listing, their site appears on the first page, i.e. top 10 on Google, versus position at 11, i.e. page 2, they've worked out that's £100,000 worth of income a month. So that position from 10 to 11 is worth £100,000 to them. Not to us, unfortunately, which would be nice, but never mind. So it's really, really important, and it is for especially kind of the bigger kind of the big boys out there. It's a real battle, and basically all we really want to say is that launching a site is not just for Christmas. It's an ongoing thing, which is why all of our clients, even this one which is just launched, it will be an ongoing kind of partnership that will last for a long time. Okay? So Google will change stuff. Big one obviously coming in June, July. The competitors will change stuff. The client will change stuff. The client will write stupid stuff in their webpage which will affect the rankings. And then you go, why did you do that? Yeah, browsers, new browsers come out, all sorts of technology comes out that we can play with. So that's, I think, did I miss anything?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We missed one important thing.
Right.
Okay.
Can't believe I forgot this bit. This is kind of important. Google Search Console is used to be called Webmaster Tools, and it's your way of telling Google about your site and that you are wanting to draw their attention to it. You access it with a Google account, and then you add they're called properties. You basically add your site to it. It gives you a little HTML file which you upload, and that verifies that you own that site or have control of the Search Console for it. And there's a few steps we go through. We firstly give it a sitemap. So any site you build, if you want it to be indexed, should have both a human readable sitemap and an XML sitemap. And so you add a sitemap by giving it the URL for it, and then it goes away and gets it, and it will then know what pages it needs to index. That's the first step. Second step is to check that your site has a robots.txt. This is a text file that lives in your HTML root that bots look at, and you can instruct them what to look at or what not to look at. For example, you might not want them to index your PDF directory because it's just got lots of irrelevant files in, like appointment calendars or something like that. It's still public, still useful for your site users, but you don't want them coming up in search. So this is a standard robots file, and it says basically disallow nothing. So everything that you can find on our site I want you to index. If we were to put /admin, then it would tell the bots ignore anything that is /admin anything. Yeah? But it's important that you have this base file there, because otherwise the bots will go, well, we looked for it and it wasn't there, and they'll rank that as being a fault. So sitemaps, robots.txt. The other file that the bots will look for that we often forget about is the fav icon. So this little picture up here. Do you all know about those? Yeah? It's an easy thing to overlook. And it's often best to make your fav icon at the point where you're converting your design files into HTML rather than leaving it for the last minute. Because again, everybody looks for it, if it's not there, it'll throw a 404. So once we've told Google about our sitemap and checked our robots.txt, we then go to fetch to Google. And two options, desktop and mobile. Say fetch. It goes away and thinks about it. Once it's finished thinking about it, you can then say request indexing. And it gives Googlebot a bit of a kick to say, come and have a look at this one. Indexing naturally can take up to 6 weeks. So if you want your site to be found quickly, you need to do this step. Once 48 hours have passed, sometimes more, sometimes less, you can then have a look at your index status, which unfortunately for this site is still not done. And you can look at the crawl errors, which is another handy page that
will tell you about any broken links or bad pages that it finds. So particularly if you've launched a site to replace an old one, there might be index pages that are no longer part of that site, but you didn't know about them because they weren't there. Like this PDF, didn't know that existed. Google knows about it, so I now need to say, well, that doesn't relate to anything else, so tell Google to ignore it completely. Or go, oh, right, we do need that somewhere, it's now here, and then I can tell Google that it is in its new place. The cleaner your stats and errors are, the more Google will like you and the better your rating will be. So it's lots of tiny little things, when added together, will add up to good search performance. In and of itself, any one of these things aren't critical, except titles and URLs and H1. But you add it all up together, and you will see an elevation in your search performance.
Just wanted to end with giving you a bunch of tools.
Just wanted to end with just running through a really boring list of tools that you might find useful. Okay, so most of them we've already said. So you've got Screaming Frog, which is an app. You've got Pingdom Speed Test, which is awesome. You've got Google Page Speed Test, which is that one that we hate, but there you go. There's a couple of paid for ones, which give you a free trial thing. One's called SEMrush and one's called Deep Crawl. Again, all these things search and crawl your website like Google does, and then try as much to tick the boxes that Google wants. There's another one called CheckMoz, checkmoz.com, which looks at the health of your domain name. So this is getting really nerdy now. So the Moz, each website has got a rank, and Google has well, it's not even just Google. Each website's got a rank based on a bunch of things about popularity. One of them is backlinks. So backlinks is on the right-hand side there. The more backlinks you've got,
What's a backlink?
Backlink, good point. So the more link.
I was just about to get started.
So if you imagine, if you do a web search for something, chickens, right? Where's chickens? Likely to come up top of the list or high up the list is Wikipedia. And there's two reasons for that. One is because it's got three reasons, sorry. One is because it's got loads of pages that all link to itself. The second one is people click on that link to find out about chickens. And the third and the most important one is because lots of people link back to Wikipedia. So people use it as a kind of reference point. So I found out about this information here, and then it's a link back to Wikipedia. So these things are backlinks, i.e. other websites that are linking to your website. And those are what Google really likes, because it thinks if this page is the world expert on chickens, then lots of people are going to link back to this page. So backlinks are really, really important. So you can see there the bottom one, Johnny Rocks So Drunk, I can't say that. Johnny Rocks Chauffeurs Co. They've got 876 backlinks. Now I know that is paid for backlinks, because that's a ridiculous amount of number for a crappy little website. So there are paid backlinks which are dodgy, and I wouldn't advise doing because Google will find you out and block you. And then there's kind of natural links, which are people linking to you, right? So the domain authority is the one on the left. Again, the one at the bottom is high because of the backlinks. And there was another one, another link.
Siteliner.
Siteliner. So what Siteliner does is crawls your website like Google does. It's rather depressing because it looks for duplicated content on your pages. And when I say depressing, it means if you've got stuff on the footer and in the header that's the same on every page because it's a website and that's what people expect, it marks that as duplicate, which is annoying. But it's really useful for working out if you've got two pages that are very nearly almost the same. again, it's all about duplicate content. So there's a bunch of tools out there, most of which are very new, as in, out this year, last year, to help you with this stuff. It's all very nerdy, but I think you either, as I say, you either get really, really into it, or you ignore it completely. And there you go. And that's basically there, with all this stuff. And the launch of websites. Okay. Anyone got any questions? Since we bored you so long. Any questions?
Yeah, that's obviously quite a lot. I think there's also, I think you're right in that Google sort of dominates everything about how you get your market, whatever site it's about, out there. Have you dabbled in Adwords at all? I mean, I know you mentioned that, and obviously it's a paid mechanism. How do you find that with clients? Are they willing to invest into that?
So basically it depends on the size of the client.
Yeah.
So these guys, and it depends on how much they, so it's about, so you pay, the way AdWords works is you pay, I don't know, you pay for a keyword, and let's say you pay £10. If someone clicks on that link, then you have to pay £10, and then they come to your site, and then no matter what they do on your website, you still have to pay the £10, right? So it's about the conversion rate of that click, and how much that, and how willing to pay that £10 that person is, okay? But the reason that Google is filthy, unbelievably rich, and it has the money to basically do Google Maps that no one else in the history of Earth has been able to do, and does all these other cars and what have you. The reason Google is so rich is, I'm going to go back now. Basically, I pay my £10 for this keyword. My competitor comes along and pays £10 1p. So the next time I have to go, right, fine, I have to pay £10 2p, and so it goes on and on and on and on and on. So the really, really high keywords, high ranking keywords that are really valuable, something like, I don't know, chickens, maybe not so much, mobile phones, UK, something like that, I would imagine would be worth, £200, £300 per click or something ridiculous, It's just silly. So once you begin that journey, it is a turf war again, and that is how Google becomes rich. So yes, we have dabbled, and yes, we do stuff for our clients. It's also, I mean, our job is mostly for, if someone comes to that page from a click, what do we do with that person? So then you go into another conversation about conversion of clicks. How do you convince this person who's come from looking, they search for chauffeurs in Cotswold, they've clicked on an ad, they come to your page, we want them to do, what do we want them to do? Do we want to phone up? Do we want them to fill in a form? What do we want them to do? So it's about the worth of that click. That answer your question?
Yeah. No, it's just interesting to see how much as a company you thought about AdWords. And I mean, I've had a dabble with it myself, and it is an expensive investment, a very expensive, and you can get so overwhelmed by the fact that you put so much money into it and so little has come out, that for small businesses it really hits them hard in regards to they hope. But then on the other hand, again, I did this for my dad's business essentially, which is care homes for the elderly, and the actual term I use there, care home for the elderly, was what I used as keywords, and it was my first time looking into this, and much like how you've just described there, it was exactly the same journey for myself, and but I guess from my dad's perspective at the time, he was willing to put money in, and I said to my dad, look, you're going to put so much money in, you might not get anything out of it. He said, fine. But the key thing, which I think is also important to realise, is for my dad's business, which was hopefully a new service user to be a new elderly person to come to the care home. If we managed to get that new person, it would recuperate the cost.
The value is high.
The value is much higher than just sitting there and letting your website not do anything. But that's the risk in some respect that you take, I think. It's whether the client is willing to take that risk, because you can't guarantee them. I think that's the thing I found. You can't guarantee that you're going to convert unless it was an easiest. And again, what made it more difficult is because I was trying to convert a service rather than a product. And I think the product, you can see the outcome of that because you get sales from it. And the service, it's much more difficult because you're just going to get a call, and a call might not convert. It might just be, "Hi, I'm interested," and that's it. In theory, the AdWord did its job because we got the call. But in terms of the actual outcome, we didn't potentially get the client. So
it's worth having all of the
all
other
of that,
stuff in place
exactly, yeah, before you even invest in that. Yeah, totally agree with that. There's a couple of other ones I think I'm sure you've accounted for in the process. Google Maps, getting your business on Google Maps.
Yeah, Google Places.
Google Places massively sort of ranking, and I found that anyway when doing it with my dad's business. And there was one more, directories. Just throwing your site or the service in the appropriate web directories out there. I don't know if you've tried that one. Yell.com.
Yeah,
all sorts of
it
other
comes back to
the backlinks, yeah.
Yeah, so
There are paid for ones as well.
Yeah.
There's one, here's one for your dad actually. So there is one company that owns pretty much all the local papers around the world,
That one.
right? And you can pay to go on these newspapers, adverts, right, all around the world.
It's a Z, doesn't it? It's
Jackson something or other. Jackson Press.
maybe Jackson.
So basically, your website could appear on an advert for the Canadian local Times or whatever it is, and then your backlinks go right up legitimately. It's quite dirty, but then.
Yeah, well, I guess everybody's, like you said, everybody's on a turf war. Everybody's fighting for the same thing, and it's whoever does it the most efficiently and most clever way of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's an insight to everyone here that websites are not just about designing and making them using cool technologies and tools. Actually, there's no point in doing any of that if it's not serving its purpose. And to do that, you've got to use some of these. So I learned something new about this canonical, I can't say the word properly, meta tag, I guess we'd call it. Or,
Yeah.
And I wasn't aware of that, to be honest. All I thought was make sure you've got correct permalinks, I termed them as, so that the names just match. But again, this canonical tag, whatever it's called, sounds really important, I think. Yeah. Well,
Most CMS will have that.
and mostly, yeah, as you said, most CMS will have. Okay, good. So everybody here has had some experience doing web technologies and websites and web apps and that sort of thing. So it's important to now realise you need to think about this stuff as part of the process, the development process. Okay. That's really good.
Cool.
Excellent. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Really impressed. And if you have any other questions, I'm sure the guys would be happy to answer on
Yeah.
an individual basis.
Cool.
Okay.
Thanks, guys. Thanks.